Is the S&P 500 projected to have a 0% return going forward? Should you take out a loan backed by the value of your investment portfolio? And the SAVE plan is ending. What should student loan borrowers do? Let's find out right now.
All right. You ready? And close that door because I can hear your kids.
The door is closed.
Oh, no.
All right, we got to pause. So, Mateo, I love you desperately, but I'm doing a recording for the next 2 hours, okay?
Yeah, so I watch some TV. Yeah.
Well, you can, but when the door is closed, that means I'm working. And I'm basically on TV or not being recorded. All right, we're 10 seconds into the first at-home podcast recording, and it's going great. we lasted, I literally want to go back and get a count on that. We lasted, I think, 10 seconds before a 4-year-old burst into my room without knocking.
Why are you making him cry?
Well, he wanted to watch TV, and I said, when the door is closed, that means I'm recording. And I don't think he was, because his mom's also working, and he's supposed to be at school, and he's sick, and, there's all sorts of compounding issues today. But I think he caught wind that I was going to let him watch TV while we were both working, and that's why he burst into my room asking.
Oh my gosh, you look heartbroken. Truly, I feel bad.
Anyway, the new studio. This is a home studio.
It looks great. It does look like you're in Star Trek.
Yeah. So I just posted Instagram about this. Everything you see, including the new haircut, costs $440. And what I did was actually really simple. And if you're just listening to this, you're just going to have to take my word for it. But I
log onto YouTube so we can have 61 views.
Exactly. I'm sitting in front of a white wall. I was sitting in front of a white wall, just normal residential white wall at a home, and I painted it blue. And then I put some dark brown IKEA floating shelves behind me. And then I put some LED lights on the shelves to light up the shelves, and then put a few things like some books and a little statue and stuff on the shelves. And, each piece individually makes sense. Okay, blue accent wall because blue is kind of our color, shelves, books. But then in totality, it definitely feels like Star Trek. Someone DM'd me, was like, you kind of look like a tech bro douchebag now. And I'm like, yeah.
You look like a real YouTuber.
Okay. I mean, and you said, is it always going to look like you're sitting in the dark? It's bright and sunny out right now. I'm looking at a sunny San Diego day with the window wide open. It's just the interplay of light behind me.
Whenever you have LED lights, it just makes it feel a little magical. So,
yeah,
you're on your way to being Hank Green. So love it.
Yeah, I think this was Hank Green 10 years ago. Now he's
he's in a cave.
Yeah, but he's like, oh, I'm not doing this cliche stuff like these lighted shelves behind me. I'm gonna have a cool science cave or something.
I love it.
Well, know who Hank Green is?
Now we do because no, he's the one he's one of 6 that I got right.
Oh, okay. Did I do Hank Green? Oh, okay, maybe I did.
You did Hank Green, yeah.
All right.
You did, yeah. He was one of your people, but he was one that I knew. And now I know who all those people are. I know Alex. I knew Ken Jennings. That's really the regret of my life, not getting Ken Jennings. I'm such a big Jeopardy fan. That was kind of
a tough picture. I should have given you multiple pictures on that one.
It's okay. I was too nice to you. Okay, so it looks great. I think the consensus is that it looks amazing. I think on Instagram the comments are going wild.
Yeah, I think it looks it definitely pops a lot more, but also kind of gives tech bro douchebag, and maybe that's not a miss at all. Maybe that's a hit. So anyway, speaking of finance, not tech bro, finance bro. Speaking of finance bro douchebags, what do we? Let's get into it.
We're gonna get into our first segment. Hot topics.
What is the hot topic of today?
Hot topic today, super exciting, fun, positive, uplifting stuff. Federal courts are ending the SAVE repayment plan. What does this mean for student loan borrowers?
All right. So you know how I love student loan talk, which I don't really, but we'll go through it. First of all, this is not to be confused with the SAVE Act, which is the current legislation being debated in Congress, which is the Safeguard American Voter Eligibility. They make these cute little anagrams for, disenfranchising voters. But basically, it's requiring proof of citizenship to vote, and it's also called SAVE. And this is fully something different. The SAVE Act, the require citizenship, proof of citizenship to vote thing, has not yet passed, is not yet law, has not been signed, and has, many reasons to be concerned about it, including it's going to make it really hard for people to vote if they don't have their birth certificate handy or whatever. And what we're talking about this is the SAVE plan, which was implemented a few years ago under the Biden administration. And basically, if you went to college and you borrowed money from the federal government to pay for college, then you have to pay it back over time like any loan. But there are a bunch of, kind of these swirling options of federal repayment options, federal loan options, to basically make it easier on you. Because the government said, okay, well, if we're going to give 17-year-olds a bunch of money to pay for college, maybe we should also make it easy on them to pay it back. And the SAVE plan was basically a income-based repayment plan that looked at your discretionary income and only asked you to pay 5% of your discretionary income for undergrad loans and 10% of your discretionary income for graduate loans, which is actually pretty nice. Like obviously 5 to 10% of your, discretionary income is meaningful. It's probably more than you're spending maybe on travel, maybe on, who knows what food, who knows what else, but also it's like in the realm of doable. And there's also a income exception, an income exemption completely for people who made up to 225% of the federal poverty line, which is roughly about $33,000 this year. So if you make $33,000 or less, you have to pay $0 per month. That's like your payment per month. And then also another nice thing about the SAVE plan is that the income can't grow. So a lot of times what happens this is like a real thing that happens to student loan borrowers, is they make payments for like 5, 6, 7 years. Like let's say they borrowed $80,000, they're paying $500 a month for 8 years, and then they check their loan balance and it's $100,000. And they're like, wait, I've just been paying for 8 years and I've made negative progress. And it's like obviously super discouraging and disheartening because you put all this money back into it and you're worse than when you started. That's because the interest on the loan is growing faster than your payment. And the SAVE plan said, okay, that's too defeating to borrowers. If their payment based on this calculation doesn't cover the interest due, the federal government will basically just pay the rest of the interest to keep their, principal amount flat at the worst. And so for, about 8 million student loan borrowers, this was the payment plan they had opted into, and this is how they were calculating their payments, and this is how they're paying their loans back. A federal court just said this is illegal for whatever reason that federal courts do, political or not. And so it looks like all these 8 million former students, or maybe, former students who are paying back the loan this way are going to have to do something else. What the Department of Education is doing is saying, hey, go to the other income-based repayment plan called IBR, income-based repayment. And under that plan, you pay 10 to 15% of your discretionary income instead of 5 to 10%. And also, I don't think the interest is, or the growth of the interest is capped. So basically, you could get back in that situation where you pay for 8 years and look at your balance and realize it's more than you borrowed in the first place. And so, this is obviously bad for people who are using that plan and depending on it. So that's the situation. Messy. There are a smattering of other current and future options too, but that could be an entire separate podcast on student loans, but that's the situation at a high level. What should you do if you're one of these 8 million who borrowed the money? Well, it looks like you should probably be moving to this IBR, the income-based repayment plan for now. That's going to be worse for you, but the best available option. Even the income-based repayment plan has forgiveness after 20 to 25 years. So basically, if you make all your payments for 20 to 25 years, whatever the remaining balance is gets wiped out. That sounds kind of good despite the 20 to 25 years part. But it sounds like, okay, maybe there is light at the end of the tunnel if I'm one of these people who can't even keep up with the interest. But like, let's say your balance grows to $150,000 and then that's wiped out. When it's wiped out, that is considered taxable income to you. That like gift of the forgiveness is considered taxable income. And so you're basically getting a $150,000 gift of income from the federal government, and you have to pay tax on that. So while your balance may go to zero, when your tax bill comes, you have like maybe a $50,000 tax bill if you're in the 33%, 33% marginal tax rate. So I don't actually love forgiveness either. I don't love the idea of having the, boot on your throat for 25 years just to have like a different, existential debt problem at the end of the tunnel, right? So, anytime these days you talk about judges making decisions and, Congress passing laws, I think a lot of people want to take their little litmus test. Did you ever have in science class, did you ever do a litmus test where there's a little strip of paper and you dip it in, and if it tells you if it's like turns like blue for Democrat and red for Republican, or maybe it was acids and bases back then, but I think everyone wants to like dip their little litmus paper in there and see if this is like on their team or not. And, I hate that we live in that world. And so I try not to promote that type of litmus test taking, and instead look at things in a, more unbiased way, despite that being the world we live in. But is it fair? I don't know. It depends on your circumstances, right? Like, I think there are people who are like, hey, I worked as a bartender, 40 hours a week on top of 40 hours of school. I like scrimped and I saved. I like ate ramen noodles. I like killed myself to pay my way through college while I watched these, jerks next door buy flat screen TVs with their federal loan payment, just to now be in the real world. We get the same job, same amount of money. And my reward is now they're getting their loans forgiven while I had to like work hard for them. I think there's like credibility to that argument. I think the other side of the coin is like, okay, you had such a shitty time. You want to make sure everyone else has a shitty time too.
Right.
You're like, I was stuck in traffic for 3 hours going to work, and then this guy gets to take a new highway to work. I don't know if that is really a great take either. Everyone's probably trying to do their best. And I'm sure there's specific examples of specific dudes that bought flat screen TVs who are probably jerks. But I think on the aggregate, I think most people don't want to be buried in debt or try and do their best to get out of debt, right? So is it fair? Kind of depends on your perspective on these federal programs. I don't know. What do you think, Jen? You think you are you for student loan forgiveness?
Absolutely. I don't. Well, I guess I haven't had that many conversations with people who have paid off their loans in full, who would feel that they wouldn't want other people to not suffer. I think most people that I know would want people, like anybody who had huge debt that was able to get it forgiven for paying for many, many years, would agree with that. I don't know anybody in that boat, but
that's a good point. In fact,
I haven't met anybody face to face that's been like, no, it's like, it feels like an internet trope almost, as opposed to like a real person that exists.
You actually make an incredible point, because when I've heard that position, it's talking about a theoretical person out there who, lived on rice and beans and now is offended that everyone else gets a free ride. But like, when you talk to real humans on earth, and I was like, hey, like, I might get my student loans forgiven. I've been paying them off for 11 years and I think I might get them forgiven. They don't say, fuck you, man. I worked hard in college.
I haven't met
I want
that
you to suffer
yet.
for 20,
I mean,
20 years isn't long enough.
Now that I say it, they'll come out the woodwork, but I haven't met that person yet. So in my heart, I want to believe that most people would want somebody who's, especially because the stipulations are crazy. Like, you do have to be paying for 15 years. So it's not like you did nothing.
No, like the forgiveness thing isn't any like walk in the park. And, like I said,
and if you've actually been doing that and you've been able to qualify for income-based repayment for that long, it means that you're probably not doing well in other ways. That I think that anybody with a heart would say, I'm glad that you're getting these loans forgiven.
That's a really good point. I mean, I think that like when you look at these like broad sweeping, federal legislation, you can probably look at these extreme corner cases and you're like, well, what about the Bitcoin billionaire who just lived on flat screen TVs in college and then became a billionaire, and then technically his income zero because it's all on Bitcoin, and then he gets it forgiven. You're like, okay, that one theoretical guy that you just made up, like that feels kind of unfair. But like, you know, here on planet Earth, where there's just like regular people trying to work regular jobs, that's not, you know, the bulk of this.
Right,
So,
right. An internet argument that doesn't exist in real life.
You
but
got
once
my vote,
again.
Jen. You got my vote. All right.
Wendy
So
for
anyway,
president.
let me boil this down. Yeah. Let me boil this down to what I would do. And the thing is, you know, getting into the nitty gritty of like which forgiveness program you go for, which repayment program you go for is maybe worth it. But I think it kind of is like missing the forest for the trees or whatever that saying is, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you want to pay off your loans, right? I don't love the idea of just jumping through federal hoops for 25 years to hope you get this forgiveness and then just pay a third of it in tax instead of all of it. I would much rather you go nuts and pay it off in like 4 years. And have we talked about this, Jen? Do you want to share? Did you have any student loans coming out of college?
I currently still have student loans, but I'm
you
not
still
gonna
have
disclose.
Student loans.
I'm not going to disclose how much. I don't want people in my pockets like that. Yeah, you knew that.
Okay, maybe I forgot. And how many years has it been since you had those student loans?
I graduated in 2007 from undergrad. Those are done, and then graduate was like 2014.
Okay, so 24. Yeah. So you're 12 years in. That's crazy. Are you willing to say like a number of digits? 5,
no,
6,
I'm not
7?
Gonna, I don't want y'all in my
Is it 7 digits?
That.
You owe millions of dollars?
Oh my! Does anybody owe millions of dollars in student loans? Is that possible?
No, some people do, like doctors.
That's crazy.
Okay, so confirmed. Jen doesn't owe $1 million in student loans. Okay, but yeah, so this is like
I'm not a doctor either.
That's not a doctor. Yeah. So you know, this is near and dear to your heart for sure. And for me, you know, my personal situation is I got through undergrad and grad school with no student loans. But the way I did it was like largely, maybe even primarily thanks to my parents. So I was just lucky, fortunate, privileged, whatever you want to call it. My parents saved college fund for me, which basically was enough to cover like an in-state undergrad education, which is what I did. Then I worked every summer in most school years. I also, coming out of high school, got a track scholarship, and then it wasn't a full ride, it was like a partial ride, but it kind of increased throughout the years. And all that stuff combined meant that like, you know, college savings they've covered for me had a surplus coming out of undergrad, rolled into grad school, and then I started teaching in grad school, which covered my tuition. And so it's like definitely based in privilege and luck. You know, I was just born to a upper middle class uterus in Southeast Michigan, you know? But also
I'd say that my friends are in like two buckets. Your bucket where like their parents had a nest egg or they had saved for that and had the ability to save for that, or people who are like me who are still paying it off. Because I did the same thing. Like I was an RA, so I didn't even have to pay for like any housing for a couple of years in college. I had several jobs. Like I worked a student job and like I worked at Best Buy. Like I worked since I was 16, but because of my parents are first generation American, like they came from Kenya. So like the fact that I was even able to go to like a private school like Berkeley and things like that were just like, I can't even believe I was able to do that. But even doing the same things that you did, like I just wasn't in a situation where I could, because my parents didn't, they were like, we'll sign my parents had good credit. That was like the one thing they did is like they kept their credit up so they were able to sign this massive loan. But then, you know, life is just life. So here we are.
I actually really appreciate that contrast because, you know, I was kind of making the point that like, I wasn't just like a lazy douchebag. I was like working and stuff too, but Jen's like, neither was I, you know, like, and, you know, frankly.
And I will say like preface, like there's definitely things looking back. I could have like taken less because like there was the time when you get the loan, you have like a little extra and you're like, okay, I'm going to go buy myself X, Y, and Z. So there's certain things that I could have done in terms of the loan itself and in terms of my money habits in college that I could have done better. But in terms of like working, like started at a grocery store when I was 16 and have not stopped. And like including in college when I had friends that like were out on the weekends because they didn't have to work and they were just able to like do the college thing. But it's just like, even that, I feel like I am still in a place of privilege because of like what my parents, like my dad was a professor, my mom worked at a university, you know what I mean? Like, so there's certain things that like, I find myself in the middle of like this poverty line, but also like not that privilege of like a lot of my friends, because I was at a private school. So like a lot of my friends, their parents were like, here's your college money once they got there, you know? Which impacted their lives in college and now after, because I'm still close friends with so many college people. And like, it's like it changed their whole trajectory in terms of like what they were able to do, like including like internships. Like I can't do an unpaid internship. You know what I mean? Things like that. It's like anything I do, I gotta get paid for.
So can I ask Berkeley, and this is Berkeley with 2 E's at the end, not the California one, the East Coast Music School, Berkeley.
Yes.
But when you went to college, do you have a sense of like the annual total cost of?
It was like $40,000 a year, and I got a scholarship for $8,000. So like even that was like barely put a dent in like what the grand scheme of things, especially back then. So, and then I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, so you were saying like, oh, I could have done things better, but that kind of brings me back to a point I always make, which is this is nuts that we're like burdening our 17-year-olds with this type of decision. It's like, hey, do you want to go into 40,000 times 4 is $160,000. And does that include room and board, or is that just the
Yeah, that was everything. And then I moved off campus for a year and then moved back to be an RA because I was like, I don't want to pay for housing.
No, it's like so it's like, hey, 17-year-old, do you want to go into $160,000 of debt to go to this private college? And as a 17-year-old, you're like, I don't know. I have no possible like experience context for knowing whether that's a good idea. And the general sentiment seems to be that college is a good idea. So, and private school seems to be a good thing. So I will, and then, then you're like, oh, 18-year-old Jen, you shouldn't have like splurged and bought that $50 iPod or whatever it is. You're like, okay, like, is that really the problem? Or was it the $40,000 a year, like, decision you had to make coming out of high school? Yeah. So yeah, it's all crazy. But anyway, if you have student loans, this is my take, which is, I don't love the idea of stretching out as long as possible and, trying to lower your income to qualify for lower payments. Like I much prefer the other extreme, which is try to make as much money as possible, try to grow your career as much as possible, and go totally ham on these loans, right? Even for you, John, like if you're 12 years in, like imagine if that student loan payment goes to zero, that probably would make a meaningful difference to your life, right? And, I talked to some people who literally, I don't think this is you for sure, but I talked to some people who, stay in careers that are less income because they get a lower student loan payment that way. Or there's even like the public service student loan thing where it's instead of 20 years, it's 10 years, but then they spend 10 years working, at like a low profit school or whatever it is. Not that that's not noble work. It is noble work. But if your only reason for doing it is to, live in poverty for 10 years to try to get your loans forgiven and then pay the tax on those loans, I'd much rather you go work at some soulless corporate America job for 4 years, pay it off, be debt free, and then go work, go do the public service thing for 20 years or whatever, in the way that you want. So, go ham, go nuts, like make huge chunky payments to those loans as fast as possible, get out of debt. And then once you don't have debt, it really opens up your options. I know it's easy to say on a podcast and hard to do, and you might be, on a stuck situation, but that's my thinking. That's the way I look at it.
I love it. All right.
This is a real student loan convo.
That was a real student loan convo.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Okay, great. Let's get into our next segment.
Money.
Can I ask a dumb one?
This is where you ask smart questions to dumb guys. Do we know the name of today's question asker or their location?
We do. His name is Mo.
Mo?
Which is a nickname, but he asked for a nickname and not a
name.
And
it's okay to refer to him as a he, him?
I believe so, yes.
Okay,
knowing the full name, it'd be very surprising if this was a girl.
Okay, but you did assume the gender. Got it.
I did assume. Right. I don't think I asked. I've progressed, and now my responses are like, "Can I ask your preferred pronouns?" But this is back when I'm like back in the archives. I'm trying to get the people who asked questions at first, and I didn't ask that question back then. So this is kind of a longer one, but I felt like the context was worth it, and I appreciate the question. I think it's a great question. So. Mo says, I have a taxable brokerage account and tax advantage retirement accounts, all basically in VTSAX. I need to borrow some money, about $10,000, for a personal, non-medical family expense. I would not be able to pay off $10,000 on a credit card within one billing cycle. I know touching their retirement accounts is a no-no, and credit card debt interest rates are insane. So I considered a personal loan versus taking money out of my taxable brokerage. As I researched online, though, I read that a line of credit from my taxable brokerage account may be best, as there would be no capital gains and I would not lose my investment's performance. However, when I looked at the line of credit from my Vanguard account, I saw that the options are to apply for margin trading or option trading, perhaps both. What considerations should I make when choosing which of the two to select or both? I'm not looking to make profits, but to minimize the cost of my loan.
All right, Mo. So this is, good question. You want to
It
borrow
may have been
10,000.
Also time sensitive, so hopefully this is
Mo
can help.
specifically, you're probably checking this like 3 months later, being like, "This is no help." But
Yeah.
let's be real here. If you're asking a question to a podcast, that's probably not your. If we're your financial advisor, you probably can't expect really quick responses. Try texting or something next time. Just kidding. Go to hellonectarine.com and get a real financial advisor.
Jesus.
So yeah, you want to take $10,000. You've got, I assume, you didn't give numbers, but you've got probably significantly more than that inside of your investment accounts, both tax advantage accounts and your taxable brokerage account. And so what do you do? And you said, hey, I read that instead of just selling some of the shares and taking the money out and spending on what I want, I can take a loan out backed by, my investments. And there's really two. You said options trading. That doesn't really make any sense to me. I don't think that would apply in your situation. I think there's really two types of loans you can take out against your investments. One is called a margin line, which basically you turn on for your account. And then once you have a margin account, then you can basically spend more than you have available in there, and it automatically just counts against your investments. So for example, if you had $100,000 worth of investments, you could buy $100,000 worth of VTSAX, and then it would go let you buy $20,000 more of Apple stock or something. And so you actually own $120,000 worth of stock, but 20,000 of that is counted as debt. That sounds pretty cool, right? You're buying $120,000 worth of stuff with only $100,000 worth of original money, but there's a loan balance there. You basically borrowed the $20,000 from the brokerage, and that loan balance is really high. Right now, for Vanguard, for a loan up to $20,000, it's 12% per year. And so if you borrow at 12% per year to go buy investments, you're on very thin ice, right? Because if those investments are producing less gain than 12%, you're actually losing money on the deal to interest, and doesn't even conclude the risk, which we're going to talk about in a sec. So that's a margin account. Basically, it just lets you automatically spend more than you have, and you can even just transfer money out of the margin account, and that just puts money on your loan. And so, let's say again, you had $100,000, you could transfer $10,000 to your checking account to spend on this family expense that you mentioned, and then basically is debiting you that interest per day until it's paid back. It's very flexible. It can, it's literally a day-by-day process, but it's also risky. We'll talk about it in a sec. The other type of loan you can take out against your investments is called a security-based line of credit, or an SBLOC. It's kind of like a, what's the mortgage line of credit? Something lock?
HELOC?
Yeah, it's like a HELOC, except for it's a SBL lock, SB lock. HELOC is a home equity line of credit. SB lock is a security-based line of credit. Security is just a word that means stocks and bonds, like investments you trade on the internet, basically. Security-based line of credit are a little bit more like a bank loan than this really, really fluid margin thing, where you basically go to your brokerage, say, okay, I'm going to pledge this set of investments against a line of credit. I can then draw against it, and then there's going to be slightly better rates. And so, for example, at Fidelity right now, if you want a margin rate, it's around 12% per year. If you get a security-based line of credit rate, it's around 6 to 7% per year interest rate. So they're not like incredible rates, but actually 6 to 7% isn't terrible these days. It's kind of pretty similar to a mortgage. And so which one should you do? First, also, security-based line of credits, that's kind of like more of an underwriting thing. It's not like an automatic thing. And so with margin accounts, they'll let you do it for like 10 grand, but the SB lock at Fidelity has a $500,000 minimum. And so I don't know, but if you're talking about a $10,000 thing that you can't pay off on your credit card, you probably don't have the $500,000, I would guess, but maybe you do. I don't know.
Huh.
But that's kind of like the trade-off there. So let's do the math. Let's say you take
Just so
that.
the listener knows, Jeremy has some charts going in our document right now. It's very intimidating.
This is the segment of the podcast where I scream numbers into a microphone and everyone.
But they don't have to look at this daunting chart.
Yeah. Well, we recently did a study and it showed that 12% of listeners to the Personal Finance Club show who are driving the highway veer off the highway and have a fiery wreck. But luckily for us, we have so few listeners that rounds down to 0.
We're not in that number. Wait, can we share this? Can he'll put this in the thing so people can see what I'm looking at? Is that okay? Because it's crazy. Okay.
Yeah. Put these images in there. It's not. It's a simple spreadsheet. I whipped up in 10 seconds.
Normally you're just like chatting in there, and so I saw a chart and I was like, "Whoa, he went to work."
Okay. I work on all these. Anyway, so let's say you borrow the $10,000 from Vanguard, and you get that 12% rate that you suggested, and then let's say you can pay $1,000 back a month. It's going to take you into the 11th month to pay it back, and then at the end of the entire and at the end of the 11th month, you'll have spent $104 more on the interest than the gain on your investments. So basically, because you did this borrowing, this HELOC or this margin thing, this borrowing thing, you actually have less money than just doing the thing you're trying to avoid, which is sell the shares. So for example, the other option is you just sell $10,000 worth of shares, you spend the money whatever you want, and then $1,000 a month for the next 10 or 11 months, you put it back into your investment account and that money grows. If you did the sell your investments thing and just pay yourself back, kind of like be your own bank, I'm using quotes here because that's a line that's often misused by insurance salesmen. But if you just treat it as a bank, you take out the money, you spend it, and then you pay yourself back over 10 to 11 months, then you'd have $104 more. And that's because and this is assuming, by the way, a 10% gain in the stock market. That's been the historical average, and a 12% cost to the loan. And so if you're borrowing money at a higher rate than you're earning, you're worse off by borrowing. And that's frankly kind of like a best case. I guess the best case scenario is you get just a lucky period of time where you're more than 12% and you actually do end up a little bit better, but still it's really, really marginal. The worst case scenario is, let's say you have $20,000 worth of investments and you borrow $10,000 and then this Iran thing really goes crazy and then the stock market drops by half and your 20,000 drops to 10,000. Then what happens is Vanguard gets nervous and they say, oh, he has $10,000 of debt and now his investments are only worth $10,000. This is our last chance to get our money back before the market drops even more. We're going to sell all of his shares and pay ourselves back, which they can do in a margin account. They will automatically sell your shares to pay themselves back as your investments are tanking. That leaves you with 0 invested and that money spent, right? So that's like much worse when you would have still had $10,000 invested if you had you would have had the half your shares invested if you just sold your shares. So margin borrowing is very, very expensive and very risky, because if you borrow and the market goes down, they sell your shares at a loss to make themselves whole, and you're left with paying all the interest and having nothing left in the shares, right? So I wouldn't do that. Let's say, for example, you do have the 500,000, instead of the 12% rate, you get the 7% rate. Now you're like, okay, wait, now I'm making 10% and I'm only borrowing at 7%. That's like a 3% arbitrage opportunity. Arbitrage is a fancy word to say like, move some money here from over there and we'll make money on the difference. And in that case, after 11 months, when your debt is paid back, you would actually be ahead by $151. And so over 11 months of kind of doing this arbitrage of this $10,000, you would be ahead by $150. But, is that a lot? Is that really like move the needle kind of money for you for doing this like risky loan thing where you're paying interest? And that only works, again, if you get your 10% rate. So for me, my bottom line is I would not do any of these things. For that $10,000, Mo, bro, I don't know if this has already happened for you, but all you other Mo's out there listening and hopefully not crashing to the median on the highway because you fell asleep when I was shouting numbers on the microphone, don't borrow money against your investment portfolio just to try to pay it back quickly, just sell a few shares. And in Vanguard, you can go sell the shares that have the least appreciation, so you pay little to no tax on those, and then pay it back over a few months, no risk. You use your investments the way they're designed to spend money on things that you want. And I think people get so fixated on this like clever financial footwork where like, oh, I don't want to interrupt compound growth, and I want to use this tax-free loan to build. It's like all this clever stuff, but then you put the numbers in this fancy spreadsheet that makes Jen very concerned, and like it's a few bucks. It's like a lot of risk for maybe a few bucks. And frankly, in your case, Mo, you would end up worse borrowing because you'd probably be borrowing at a higher rate than the market is likely to return. And the market returns, I'm putting little air quotes here, 10%. But this year to date, I think we're actually down a little bit because we started a war unexpectedly, and now the market is down so far halfway into March this year. And so if you were banking on your 10% for 3 months, you haven't gotten 10%. You've gotten negative a couple percent or whatever it is today. And so I would rarely really do this. That said, I've done this once. This one time when I bought the house, you're sitting behind me now. I'm sitting in my house. We had this really kind of common situation, which is we're trying to sell our house, use the proceeds from that house to buy a new house. But you always have this timing issue, which is, okay, I want to make sure I buy my new house so I can move the stuff and then sell the old house after I move. How do you, bridge the gap? And there's a bunch of different options. There are literally bridge loans for this reason. You could do like a sale deal where they can't move in until, rent back from the owners of the new place. There's like a bunch of different options. And basically, based on the timing of our deals, what we landed on was we needed about $1 million for like 6 weeks. And so I went to my Fidelity brokerage account and I wrote $1 million check to the mortgage company or, the seller or whoever. And then for 6 weeks, I sat there like biting my nails, hoping there wasn't some crazy movement in the market until my old house sold. And when my old house sold, I took that $1 million and put it right back into that line of credit. So I was whole again, and it worked out fine. I paid, I think I paid like a couple $1,000s in interest over that time because it was a lot of money. But a couple $1,000 to $1 million isn't that bad, and it worked for me. And I, understood the risk, but for me that was like a very, very temporary thing where just selling $1 million all at once and realizing all the tax implications and buying it back wouldn't have made as much sense for me, I don't think. But for most situations, and normally what I do in like 99% of the other situations is when I need money, I don't monkey with these lines of credit. That's the only time I've done it in my entire life, in fact. When I was looking for this very, very short-term temporary thing where I knew an asset was selling and it was going to pay it back immediately. That's when I did it. For normal things, I'm like, oh, if I need a car, I just go sell enough shares, take the money, go buy the car. And for sure, for a $10,000 expense, that's what I do there too. So yeah.
All right. Sometimes these things don't click until I'm like reviewing the episode. I feel like this is one of them where I'm going to listen back and I'm like, okay. Because I am like, I'm trying to do some producing back here. I'm taking screenshots and making notes. So, I want to listen to what you said.
No, admittedly, this is, but I mean, I think what you're saying, John, is a great point, because if you like are sitting there being like, I can't even wrap my brain around this margin line of credit thing, you write the check, you pay, like that's when you start talking like that. So you're so much more likely to be going down a path that's not right. Simpler usually means you make more money, and introducing complexity usually means you end up with less money. And so what Mo is talking about is some really tricky, complex thing to borrow money against his shares without actually selling his shares. Don't do that. If you've got $30,000 in VTSAX, go sell 10,000. Now you have $20,000 in VTSAX and $10,000 cash. Go spend the cash on the family expense that you mentioned. And then with your income, as you're going to pay back the loan you're planning to pay back, just pay back yourself and buy more shares, and you're back up to 30,000. And in that case, you're praying for the market to crash, because then you can buy back the shares at a cheaper price, and you'd actually be ahead, right, without the loan, right? So the loan just introduces risk, and the time frame and everything is so short that what's going to actually leave you better off depends on future knowledge of the market, which none of us have.
Okay, I'm gonna interject here because this reminded me of a question we got from Jody, who hopefully will be able to answer her full question. But it reminds me that she said, P.S. I missed the segment, explain it like I'm 5. Since my goal now is teaching my young adult and teen children about things such as IRAs, 401ks, stocks, ETFs, expense ratios, taxes, and such. I appreciate your clever and creative ways to help explain these principles simply to my children who are just learning for the first time. Maybe a segment called Explain It to a Young Teen Adult. So, like, I think we're kind of there with, like, the rest of our segments where, like, young teens could wrap their heads around, young teens and Jen. Yeah. Anyway, that's Jody.
Thanks, Jody. That's really nice. I mean, you
we got a lot more complaints than accolades for that one, but
I think everyone's right. I think Joey's right. I think if executed well, that would have been a good segment. I think that we just gotta make better content, and we're trying. We're getting better every week. And there's so many of you who say they look forward to the Thursday episodes. I mean, I say so many. We joke about the low listenership, but it's not bad. It's like thousands. It's definitely in the thousands. If I was like sitting in front of an audience of thousands right now, I would be like freaked the fuck out. And so the fact that I'm sitting here like, being self-deprecating about how few people it is, like, I think it's amazing, and I love all you Thursday listeners out there.
Whoop whoop. Okay, let's move on to Scroll Patrol.
Scroll Patrol.
Let's get into it. I found a video on the internet. Jeremy's going to watch it and react in real time. You know the drill. So we're going to open this together and let me know when you're ready to watch.
If you want to get rich, don't buy the S&P. Buy a Ferrari. Let me explain. Every time a supercar drives by, there is a cranky buy and hold investor saying, if they only took that money and put it in the S&P 500 for 10 years, it would be worth millions. This investor, while he thinks he sounds smart, is using the internet's most favorite piece of fake data, the 12% annualized return in the S&P 500. The problem with this, and even if we cherry picked, the real return is more like 7%, and that is backward looking into an environment that looks nothing like the one we're in right now. Right now, multiples are trading around 21x. At high multiples, the forward return is more like 2 to 3%. In real terms, that's 0% or even negative. That means that the biggest myth of getting rich from buy and hold is officially dead. And you might as well just buy a Ferrari, because the 458 Speciale returned 14% last year alone, according to Haggerty. In this scenario, at least you'd have something cool to brag about. All right, I have to admit something. Am I really telling you to buy a Ferrari and assuming that the Ferrari price will appreciate into infinity? Of course not. But what I am telling you is if you expect to get rich from lazy buy and hold investing in an environment with high multiples and enormous chaos in the market, you are going to be sorely disappointed. You will never have Ferrari money. And I dare you, go ask the guy in the Ferrari how he got rich. I can assure you he's not going to say buy and hold investing.
Should I buy a Ferrari?
I was rolling my eyes a lot during that. I didn't like a lot of that. He kind of does some very dishonest math. And so, it's like a lot of strawman arguments. Strawman arguments, like a fake argument that's easily disprovable when no one's saying that. So he's saying, first of all, he's saying the 12% S&P. I've heard that a couple of times. Most people, if you look at the numbers going back 100 years, the annualized nominal return is about 10%. Nominal means the actual amount of dollars you get. So if you put in $10,000, you get a 10% return, you'll have $11,000 because 11,000 is 10% more than 10,000. And he's saying it's actually 7%, which is actually true, because when you look at the real return after accounting for inflation, then in real terms, you have about 7% more buying power every year. So while the number of dollars are going up, things are getting more expensive too. And so you take your 10% return, you take 3% of inflation away, and you get about 7% over the last 100 years or so. And, that part is mostly true. He doesn't mention the inflation thing, but he kind of uses it dishonestly shortly thereafter. Then he goes in the part I really don't like, which is, by the way, I've never seen this before, so I'm just going from memory. But he goes in the part saying, okay, in this environment with the chaos in the market and the blah, 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 he says the forward-looking returns are 2 to 3%. That's when like my eyes roll through my brains, because no one knows the forward-looking returns, and especially not this guy. And
why are you saying especially not this guy? Is it because his shirt
because
is so
he's
tight?
making dishonest videos with like a very tight shirt that's got like
so tight
4 buttons on buttons. I actually kind of nervously saw that my collar, this was before I saw this, like I'm wearing a little button button down. I added a button to it earlier in the episode when I was like, I think that's showing too much chest. And I added a button.
This guy.
And this guy's like 4 or 5 buttons down.
Too much chest hair.
Yeah. And so he's saying the forward looking is 2 to 3%. And then he said after inflation, that's more like 0%. I was like, whoa, okay. You just took out inflation twice. You took us from 12% to 7% because of inflation. Then you took us from 2% to 3% because of inflation. You can't keep deducting inflation every single time. I think 2 to 3% is the real forward-looking outlook. That's accounting for inflation. So you can't take it twice. That said, if you go back 5 years, you know what they said the forward-looking projection was? They said it was like 2 to 3%. You go back 10 years, 2 to 3%. You go back 20 years, 2 to 3. Like they're always saying the forward-looking is 2 to 3%. And maybe, every once in a while it is. But again, over 100 years, it is 10%. And 7% after inflation. And so, his whole thing saying, okay, I know more than you do about what's going to happen in the future, and you're only going to get around 0% of real growth. I'm like, no, that's absolute nonsense, because, I know if you own the companies of the world, if you own Walmart and FedEx and Google and Nvidia and Tesla and Microsoft and Amazon, and you own those for a long time, you're going to get a lot of wealth from the dividends those companies pay out and the increase in share prices those companies grow and innovate. Just assuming that all those companies are going to be worth 0 going forward is so silly. That said, if you ask someone in a Ferrari how they bought the Ferrari, I kind of agree with them. They're very unlikely to say buy and hold investing. They might say I'm in crippling debt and I can't afford this. I think that's probably true for a lot of them. A lot of them might say I was a hugely successful business or real estate investor. Totally. I'm in favor of that too. But I bet you, most of those Ferrari drivers will say, and I do with much of my money now, I buy and hold invest. I buy and hold real estate. I buy and hold the stock market. Of course, I didn't just get there by putting $50 a month in. I worked just like Jen and I did in college, and just like we're doing now. I worked and I was successful and I made a high income. And now with my wealth, it sits there in index funds or mutual funds or whatever it is. And so it's a combination of those things. I don't really know what he's suggesting. I assume he sells some business course or something, and maybe part of it's fine, but yeah, I found a lot of that to be very dishonest, because it's basically like this big straw man being like, look, I took it from 12% down to 0%, so this whole thing is worthless. Do this other thing. I was like, whoa, that was not real math. That's not what's going on, and that's not a fair assessment of the argument for buy and hold investing. So yeah, I give. I've seen some other videos about this guy he kind of makes these rich versus very rich videos that are funny, but I haven't seen anything credible from him in terms of actual financial advice. Yeah, so I give it a D. It's not an F. It's not I think there's some credibility to some of this stuff. You need to have high income and stuff too, but I give it a D.
Okay, all right, D. Yeah. Not totally failing. I'm mostly concerned about the shirt. All right.
The shirt I give. I don't want to pick on his appearance, because he looks pretty jacked and he's got a nice white collared shirt on.
It just needs clearly, to go one size
I went
up.
A different. Yeah, maybe a size up, maybe a couple buttons up. He'd look really sharp. But who am I to say? I'm not. This isn't personal.
Fashion club.
Yeah, fashion club. That's the word I was thinking.
This still keep it personal, PFC.
Yeah, maybe we should start PFC, personal fashion club.
Absolutely not.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to money. Jeremy had time today.
I had time today.
You have time. I am in the TikTok archives. You posted a video in 2021 about how much cash you should keep. It's short, so we'll play it now.
This is how much cash you should keep in each of these different types of accounts. Anything above these reasonable amounts should go towards investing, preferably in index funds. That way you're not bearing too much risk and you have some cash in case of emergency, and you're also not bearing too little risk and you're putting your money to work for you. Remember, you can build wealth by following the 2 rules of Personal Finance Club: live below your means and invest early and often.
And this commenter says, but then how am I buying a house if I invest all of it?
Cool. So just to recap, I go over 3 different types of accounts: checking, which is cash; savings, which is cash; and then the rest invested. And the general message here is, you don't want too little cash, such that if you have, rent comes due or you have some sort of emergency, you are, stuck. And in fact, going back to Mo, I'm kind of curious, like, does he have a cash emergency fund? $10,000 is a small, not, it's obviously a very big amount of money, but small enough that, I think most, employed people should be aiming to have at least that much in their emergency fund. And that would be the first place to go before you even need to go to your investments. And if Mo was following this advice in that video, he would have 3 to 6 months of his expenses in a savings account. And that would be enough to cover a $10,000 unexpected expense. Then he doesn't need to borrow anything against his investments. He can just pay it back, right? And so the whole point is you don't want too little cash where you're kind of getting pinched, but you don't want too much cash either. Because if you have, let's say your net worth is $200,000 and $180,000 of it is in cash, you're missing a huge opportunity to grow because you're not getting the great returns of the market. You're getting the non-existent returns of a savings account. And this commenter very fairly says, hey, but if I'm buying a house, how do I buy a house if I invest all of it? So if all my money, if my checking account has my monthly expenses, my savings account has my emergency fund, and everything else is invested, where does my down payment go? And that's a really good point. Honestly, that video, if it was more complete, it probably should have said, there's a third bucket here for things called sinking funds. A sinking fund is basically saving for a specific thing. So for example, it could be an annual expense. So maybe Christmas presents, let's say you spend $600 a year on Christmas presents. Instead of having that be an emergency every December, you could put $50 into your Christmas, $50 a month into your Christmas sinking fund. Then when Christmas comes around, you put in the last $50 and you've got $60 or $600, and you don't need to figure out where that money's coming from. And you could have a bigger sinking fund for like a home down payment. And so, for example, if you're trying to save up $30,000 for a home payment and you put away $1,000 a month, 30 months later, you'll get there. And that wouldn't be in your checking account. I mean, it could physically be in there, but it wouldn't be, what I was talking about there. And it could physically be in your savings account, but it wouldn't be part of your emergency fund. It'd be this other additional cash. And I really do believe that money you plan to spend in the short-term future, which is within a few years, that's all short term, should be saved in cash. So for sure, you could, just like I suggested to Mo, go back and sell some of your investments and buy a home. That'd be perfectly reasonable depending on your situation. But if you're in the saving for a down payment mode, I would be putting into cash in a third bucket. And so I think this commenter is right to point that out. By the way, it's very hard to make a 30-second TikTok and, fully explain all personal finance. And so there's always, whatabouts that you can critique. And this commenter made a good one. But yeah, I would say, hey, put that in a cash in a savings account, or go to your brokerage account. You can always sell those shares and use them to buy a house if you want.
Nice. I'll have to say your videos have gotten a lot better. But I did like the song.
Yeah, no, it's very cringe looking at my 2020 era.
You look so little in the bottom of the video, and then the music's like the 70s music. It's so cute.
I will say I hustled back then. I was like, TikTok was like this brand new thing. Or nothing
I was
else to do.
surprised you had stuff going back there.
Yeah, I was like, I'm doing it was actually me and Vivi back then. We were like, all right, I'm doing 4 a day. So I was like, I would just film like 30 in a day and have her edit them. And we were like cranking out once a week, we'd film 30 videos. It was kind of intense.
I assumed when I scrolled back that far that everything would be from like 2023, 2024, and you just like uploaded old videos. But I was like, wow, he was posting in 2021.
No, that was when I was like trying on TikTok. Now I just, I'm so bad at social media. We don't
give yourself a break.
I think other people with our kind of follower counts are like so much more on the ball, and I just kind of am very haphazard about it these days, at least.
It's all right. You're doing great.
Hey, we deliver a podcast every Thursday, don't we?
We do. Can I read?
Yeah.
I know this is a long episode, but can I read one nice comment that we got as well?
Yes. And if you want your comment read or you want your review read, go leave us comments and reviews. And maybe we'll have enough people where some of them will statistically die in a fiery car crash listening to our podcast. Jesus. I mean, I don't want that to happen, but eventually it's going to happen. If every single person,
that would be a good thing for us.
It would be a bad thing for everyone involved, but I'm just saying if every single person in the U.S. was listening to our podcast and then there's a car
Somebody's
crash,
gonna die.
Right, we can't stop car crashes. Those have been going on since all of cars. So
bleak. So I'm gonna flip this narrative a little bit. This is from Claudia, who says, "Hi Jen, and you're in parentheses, and Jeremy. So I'm actually the main event here. Thank you. It's probably because I'm in the inbox. I've been meaning to send this message. I've been an avid listener of the show. Truly enjoy the content, the banter, the jokes, and side talk, period. Shout out to me. No, I was kidding. I hope you guys do earn an award next year. LOL, you both deserve it. So many more positive things to say, but I'll keep it short and sweet. Look forward to many more episodes this year. I thought that was really sweet.
That's crazy. That's so nice. Who said that? What was
Claudia?
Claudia. Thank you, Claudia. That's really nice. That warms my heart. I actually listen to our show, and like every once in a while, there's a moment I'm like, okay, that was kind of good. And there's lots of moments where I'm like, my God, we need to get better. But we're trying. And what are you going to do except keep plowing out episodes? But yeah, that's super nice. It's really nice that you
Thanks, Claudia.
give that. I mean, I think it's to like write to a podcast and like just voluntarily give nice feedback is like so incredibly nice. I mean, how easy it's just to like go through your day
Just
without
listen.
doing that. Like I do. I'll write to my podcast.
I have one favorite podcast that I will call in because they do weekly feedback episodes. So I'll call in. Yeah.
Nice.
Because I
All
just
right.
love them so much. So I get it.
All right.
Well, give us the rules so we can get out of here.
Yeah. I know that was a lot. That's a long one. But if you want to build wealth, all you got to do is follow the 2 rules of Personal Finance Club. Rule number 1, live below your means. And rule number 2, invest early and often. See you next week.
The Personal Finance Club show is produced by Jeremy Schneider and Jen Mundia. Music by Esabalu and Homie. Send your questions to podcast@personalfinanceclub.com. The Personal Finance Club show is co-hosted by Jeremy Schneider, who is a co-owner of Nectarine, an SEC-registered investment advisor. The views expressed on this show are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Nectarine. Please refer to hellonectarine.com for all relevant disclosures. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and should not be construed as personalized investment advice or a solicitation to buy or sell any security. Listeners should consult their own financial, legal, or tax professionals for advice specific to their situation.